in my own country, which is the United States of America. Although I teach in Toronto, I'm an American citizen. And so I'm coming from the US. And, I think there are things going on around the world that we all can relate to. In India, in the US, across Europe, even across Africa. What about the question? Everywhere it seems fascist governments are coming into power. And the same issues are emerging. Issues around citizenship, issues around imprisonment, deportation. In India, they're pushing people into Bangladesh. They're deporting people now to Pakistan. In the United States now, they're rounding up people and building jail cells one after the other. And they're putting thousands and thousands of people in jail because they don't have papers, because they're undocumented people, and finally because there are brown and black people. And the white supremacy in Europe is no different, right? There is a fascist government in Hungary. There are fascist parties emerging in Germany even. New Nazi parties in Germany. In Greece, you have the Dawn Party. In Italy, you have fascist parties emerging. How is it that all around the world, these forces of fascism are emerging like they are? And yet, many of us don't know what's happening in other countries. Internationalism, the last time we saw fascism on a global level was the 1930s. At that time, it was internationalism that was able to defeat fascism. Even more now today, what we have are people in their own echo chambers, their national boundaries, speaking about their national issues. In India, that's against the Indian government. In America, in the United States, that's against the American government. But there is no joint purpose. In the 1930s, there was an international understanding that we had shared fate, that we had shared reasons to fight against fascism. And it was that international movement, which they've taken away from us in many ways. That's why I'm so happy to speak here and to speak to you all. And also, I'm so interested to hear from you all what you're experiencing, what you're doing in the face of this threat, and what we can do together. I think we need to break down these walls of nationalism at this point, because the power structure in each of these countries is just too overwhelming. Unless we fight across boundaries, we don't stand a chance against their drones, their manipulation of information, their brainwashing, their guns, their prison cells. So my question is, how do we build an international movement at this point? It's greatly needed, and this is why, as I said in this speech, Gaza becomes so important. Because Gaza is something that the whole world is looking at. In Asia, in Europe, in North America, in South America, people are getting out into the streets and protesting against genocide in Gaza because we see what Israel is doing. This inhuman violence done to the civilian population. And so the people of Gaza, in their survival, are giving us a gift of recognizing each other's humanity. In our opposition to Gaza, we can recognize each other's humanity and hopefully work together towards some solution to what is a global problem. This is not an Indian problem. This is not an American problem. This is not even an Israeli problem. This is a global problem. And the extinction, the extermination of people is a way of keeping us all silent and afraid. They want us to see what they're doing in Gaza. The inhumanity, the randomness, that any woman, child, elderly person can be exterminated with extreme violence. They want that in our heads. They want us to look at it and be afraid. Instead, we can look at that and see each other and gain courage from each other across national boundaries and engage in a struggle that has to be a global struggle. You know, in the United States, a year ago, more than a year ago now, students at every university were coming into the streets in huge numbers, protesting what was happening in Gaza. The United States government set in their police force, their National Guard, the universities themselves arrested, allowed the arrest of their own students, their graduate students, like Mohammed Khalil, who until today, 6 months later, is still in a jail cell without any due process, without any right of appeal. So again, they're using this concept of citizenship, of belonging and non-belonging. And they start with the Gaza protests, and they round people up, and they arrest them for federal crimes. Some people are facing 6 to 10 years in prison for getting out into the streets and saying, "Free Palestine." And Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. And that this aggression cannot stand. For that now, hundreds of people, and they've squashed that movement at the university. Some few brave students are still there in the streets, but still being arrested, still being beaten in the streets, still compromising their own futures, being expelled from their universities. Those without the right of citizenship are being deported. Again, this is something that's happening everywhere, I think, on earth right now. And I think we all need to, and that's why I'm so happy to be here. And as I say, to talk to you, not to give a speech, but to talk to you. How do we deal with this situation? How do we cement joint cause? How do we aim together to fight these forces again, which I don't think we can fight alone? The weapons of the state are gigantic. But the weapon of the global population, the response of the global population, is larger than any one of these single governments also. So, you know, that's essentially my call, is for some resurrection of an international coalition of people. And I think around Gaza especially, that is being built. You know, we see in the streets of London, hundreds of thousands of people protesting. In the streets in Mumbai the other day, from what I understand, there was a large demonstration, which again was broken up. So similar thing is happening all over the world. We need to unite these causes, and these causes of citizenship, of state violence, of poverty and starvation, of hunger, of imprisonment, of the erasure of just cause, and essentially the rise of fascism. Was what united everyone at that time. In 1930s, 1940s, it was the Soviet Union. But in 1960s, it was the movement against the Vietnam War. So you had Komanam, Amanam, Vietnam. You had the spectacle protests in Paris. You had people out in the streets in America. You know, there's something about internationalism, and you'll find the protests like happened, so I understand, in Mumbai. When people go out in the street and say, "Free Palestine," the police will arrive. They're very afraid of the common people taking up international messages. You can, you know, and these various issues, the environment, the treatment and rights of women, the various political factors in a local position. Nothing will happen until and unless fascism itself is defeated, and that needs to be a global effort, because we can lobby the government for change. This government, the Indian government. I can lobby as an American citizen the American government. I can write to my senators. As soon as I get out in the street and say, "Free Palestine," the police are coming. Why is that? Why do they want to keep us in our parochialism, in our own national bubbles? the greatest threat to their sense of power and their sense of they want to show fear and have us in awe of them as if they are the most powerful thing on the face of the earth. They aren't the most powerful thing on the earth. First of all, the people are. But secondly, the global order is. It's no coincidence that fascism is rising everywhere. It's not a coincidence. It's not astrological. There are forces, political forces, economic forces, geopolitical agreements between the United States, Israel, China, India, and everyone else. And as Papas was saying, what do you need if you're going to sell weapons? What do you need? You need war, right? You can't just sell weapons without war. War is the condition of destroying those weapons, so you have to buy more. And you'll find when international war becomes an issue, when international genocide like in Gaza becomes an issue, the governments will get very nervous like the United States government is. But it's an interesting thing, because if I speak out against NRC, right, the Indian government can say, well, you're shouldn't be speaking against our government. If I speak out for the people of Gaza, what can they say? It's not to critique this government, right? So what is it that makes them so nervous when we see free Gaza, when we say free Palestine? It's that we're seeing above them, that they are no longer the power, and we're expressing our, and it's very difficult if I say free Palestine here or in the United States to say you can't say that, because it's a question of freedom of speech. They can say it's national security or anti-nationalism, this and that, when you speak out against specific national policies, when you speak out against an international crime. What can they say? Are they really going to put people in prison for saying free Palestine in India? Maybe. But then we have to think what we're up against and what they're afraid of. And organize accordingly, and understand our shared future for our children and the environment. Unless and until there is peace, there's going to be no movement on environment. It's very sad that Greta Thunberg, this environmental giant activist, is now expending all her energy talking about Gaza, because she knows that unless and until human life is respected, no one can respect the environment either. So until and as long as people are lining up for food in Gaza and being shot down in cold blood, starving people are being corralled in cages and shot at. If that's going on in the world, who's going to listen to an argument about climate change, about global warming? Because that noise silences everything else. So we have to stop that noise. I understand your issues, and people meet. But I think everyone on the planet right now can agree that what's happening in Gaza is an unacceptable, inhuman war crime that affects all of our humanity. And this is the unique thing, I think, about the question of Gaza, and why I stress, because I think it needs to stop. But not only that, it allows us to talk with our cross purposes and bring our causes together around a cause I think that we all can well agree on. I don't think anyone is going to say, okay, well, and if they do, then there are enemies, right? Let Israel do what Israel and the United States are going to do. Let them slaughter these innocent people. Let them starve them. Let them burn them alive. I mean, they're burning people alive, So the fact that we can come together around Gaza, I think, is very important politically.